My name's Emma Benwell. I'm an official real-life storyteller for CCA. All the stories we read are real and submitted anonymously. I live in Devon. I'm the victim of parental alienation and false allegations from a relationship where we had a child born through donor conception into a same-sex relationship. So I met my partner in 2010. I already had a child conceived via donor conception from a previous relationship. My new partner bonded really well with my daughter, and she took on the role of parent to her. Quite early on in the relationship, we discussed extending our family. I'd always wanted more children, a sibling for my daughter, and my partner knew that she wanted children too. I had already carried a child and had had a difficult pregnancy with my first child. And since my partner was younger than I was, we decided it was best if she would carry our child. The process for same-sex couples wanting children, as you can imagine, is complicated. It's stressful, it's limited, it's invasive, and probably not very well understood or accepted in society. So legally, the only options available to same-sex couples are really only adoption, which is lengthy, or IVF, which is extremely costly. And there are no guarantees. So in both cases, the process is very selective, and there are still prejudices towards lesbian and gay couples. All of these hurdles tend to deter even the most tenacious and securest of couples. So the alternative for a gay couple is to seek out a private donor, where a private agreement between a third party can be made. And we decided to then research donors via the internet. There is a plethora of information, donors, help and resources out there, without the expense of intrusiveness or a fertility clinic. We spent several months seeking a suitable donor. Eventually, we found a man who was in agreement with our plans. We met a few times to discuss the practicalities and logistics of the process, and it was agreed between us that we wanted to find somebody that did not want any involvement. He had been a donor for a leading fertility clinic, so he was familiar with the complexities same-sex couples faced when trying to start a family. In 2013, our daughter was born, and we both played a full parental role in her life. My eldest daughter embraced the fact that she had a sibling, and they both bonded very well. However, in 2015, I discovered that my partner was secretly planning to leave the relationship. She had become quite distant leading up to the separation, obsessed and controlling with our daughter. Reflecting on things now, I believe that she was already beginning to alienate me from her. I just didn't see it at the time. She left the relationship in February 2015. I was having contact with our daughter until May, although she was making things very difficult for me. She was not committing to regular contact. She would change or restrict days and times generally, just being avoidant and not responding to texts or calls. This became very distressing for my eldest daughter, not knowing when she was going to see her sister. Also knowing that I didn't have any legal status in our daughter's life, the sporadic contact I was having, I thought it would be a good idea for both of us to complete a parental agreement, giving our daughter stability and continuity with both of her parents. My ex-partner outright refused. Things became contentious. This resulted in her telling me that I was never going to see our daughter ever again. Following this, I desperately tried to call. I would beg her to let me see our child and for both of our girls to see each other. All calls and texts were ignored, and the next thing I knew, a police officer was arriving at my door accusing me of harassment. I was horrified. I had never had any dealings with the police prior to this moment, and my eldest daughter, who was 7 at the time, was completely alarmed. She was fearful that they were going to take her mum away. With all communication now severed, I had no other option but to file an application to the family court for a child arrangements order. I waited months for a hearing. Neither myself or either of the children had any contact with each other. My eldest daughter spent night after night crying herself to sleep, begging me to let her see her sister, and there was nothing I could do. I felt helpless. Any attempt I could potentially make would result in a criminal offence. She was so distressed, she became physically unwell, she suffered academically at school, and generally became reclusive and angry. However, the court finally listed a hearing, and to my dismay, my ex-partner attended, making all manner of accusations against me, which then called for a finding of fact hearing. I had no idea what was going on anymore. The whole host of allegations were presented to the court by my ex-partner, from domestic violence to the denial of any agreement ever being made for me to parent our daughter. I was shocked, I was confused. I didn't understand why someone would do this to me. You know, someone I loved, someone I trusted. So I now had to wait several more months for another hearing. And in the meantime, my ex-partner had enlisted the backing of a solicitor. I was then bombarded with an array of statements and evidence, of which was enough to stop any contact being granted. So much for innocent until proven guilty. I had applied to the family court to ask them to help me see my daughter, and for both sisters to see each other. It had now become a complete character assassination and a witch hunt. I was isolated. I felt browbeaten, without any support or guidance with how to deal with the situation. A 4-day finding of fact hearing was listed over several months. This continued to prevent me from seeing my daughter, and from both of our girls from seeing each other. I can't even begin to tell you the level of distress and fear that this caused me. False allegations. You know, my eldest daughter was a complete psychological terrorism to her. I lost 2 jobs in the space of 12 months. I had no form of income. I nearly lost my home. My family and friends even questioned my integrity. I became emotionally unwell. I suffered from paranoia, depression, anxiety. It was awful. Once the allegations had been disproven, CAFCAS then tried to set up contact. My ex-partner refused to engage in this exercise, complaining about one of the CAFCAS officers involved. A new CAFCAS officer was introduced to the proceedings. She came blundering into the family court arena, stating she had no idea what role I play in our child's life, and she couldn't comprehend why I was making this application. She clearly had no dealings with same-sex couples with children, and seemed to impose quite a homophobic approach to her evaluations. She requested a psychological assessment of the 4 of us individually, and by this time 2 years had gone by, with still no contact with my daughter. The psychologist's assessment lasted a few hours, with a series of tick box forms to complete. Due to the process being so protracted, by the time the psychologist had carried out her assessment, she concluded that my daughter had no recollection of me anymore, and that only indirect contact would be suitable in this instance due to the conflict. Conflict? What conflict? There was never any conflict on my part. All I was trying to do is see my daughter. The only conflict present was from my ex-partner, who was determined to stop me seeing our daughter and saying and doing everything and anything in her power to fulfil her desires. I'm still astonished, bewildered and appalled by the whole family court process. At no point was my ex-partner ever reprimanded for the false allegations made against me or for the level of distress this caused. I thought perjury was a crime. Nobody ever asked to witness me with my daughter or both children together to see the relationship and bond we had. In fact, the CAFCAS officer involved went so far as to say that I was no longer allowed to refer to myself as a mother anymore to our daughter. She'd always known me as mummy and referred to me as such, and now not only was I being prevented from seeing her, but now I was told that I am not to use the name I was known by. I'm sure that a father in the same situation would not be told that he had to stop calling himself a father to that child, you know, that he helped to bring into the world. What kind of homophobic approach was this? Not considering our family unit, but adopting and implementing their own agenda to the situation and knowingly destroying my relationship with my child. I'm completely confounded by the complete narrow-mindedness of all of these professionals involved, and the slow-moving process, and their complete lack of understanding when it comes to parental alienation or same-sex couples with families. I can't even begin to tell you the emotional turmoil impact this has had on my life on a daily basis. The only analogy I can place upon this, for others to even try to comprehend, is it's like having a limb unwillingly removed from your body. You've got no idea why it was taken. No matter how hard you scream and cry, no one is going to do anything about it. You try and function without it, but nobody is going to teach you how to adapt or adjust to your new set of circumstances. The pain and grief is unbearable. You know that somewhere out there, somebody has a part of you that's missing, and it's never going to be returned to you, nor can you ever replace it. You try and function without it, but it's just not the same. From the moment you wake up, you go to sleep at night, the loss and grief is there. Even in your sleep, you suffer nightmares of how somebody stole a part of you that you cannot get back. You dream of what it was like when you once felt complete. Sometimes the pain is so overbearing, you become numb to it, unable to cry. Then suddenly, something will trigger a memory or a reminder of what you had and you cannot hold back the tears. Nothing anyone can say or do will ever make you feel any better. The end.